This is good. This is good. First of all, yeah, we're live. 7:31. I'm a little bit late, but we got some cool stuff to talk about tonight. I'm looking at Cam catalog. This one is from Comp. There are lots of others, obviously, other manufacturers and stuff. This is, I don't know. I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments if you guys know if people are still doing like printed catalogs like this. Because back in the day, particularly the Summit, I know Summit's still doing their catalog, and they're doing, they're mailing them out, which is a big expense, especially given the fact that we've all but shifted digital. But I guess there's a case to be made for some of the the older boomers that still want to get it from a catalog. But I wonder if guys are still doing that, or if it's just because it's so much easier to list it and change it online. That way you don't have to do a whole new catalog, because that used to be a fairly big expense for people, especially if you're continually adding products. So that was a problem. But I'm looking in this catalog, and I got some comments from some guys today that I was looking over, and I thought it was interesting. One of the things, when you go to check out a cam, it tells you, oh yeah, it's got, like, this one's got strong torque, excellent mid-range for 262 to 305. This is for a small block Chevy. This is a high energy cam. Works with high axle ratios, has a smooth idle. And then they change from there. They go, oh, this one's a little bit more aggressive. This one requires a converter and is best with like gears, and all the things that they say. And then usually they give you the, lift and duration, load separation angle and stuff, and then part numbers. But one of the categories that they give you often is, it's listed here on the comp catalog as RPM operating range. And so I think that there's a big confusion about that for people that are looking at that. I think a lot of people think different people think different things about what that is. Some people just think that the cam will run in that range. Okay, that's one view. The other people tend to think that that's the most, that's where this thing is going to make effective power. It's going to be optimized in that range. So that's another school of thought. Other people think that they use this range as absolutes. So they think that if this one's goes from 1800 to 5800 RPM, they think that it doesn't work over 5800 RPM, that it somehow stops working or gets valve float, or they introduce their own personal opinion about what that means. And so I wanted to cover this operating range and talk about some of the things that it is and some of the things that it is not, and why in a lot of cases I don't even think it's accurate. So we'll talk about that first. So we have one here that says this is a high energy cam. It's really small. It's a 192/200. So effectively kind of like a stock cam. And they're listing the operating range as 600 RPM to 4,600 RPM. So here's the issue with what I think happens with these operating ranges, is that if you look at that RPM range, you think, first of all, Richard was wrong. I can go at wide open throttle at 600 RPM. So that's not a real thing. I have never seen a motor lugged down on a dyno, on any sort of engine dyno, at 600 RPM. I just have never seen that. And the reason that you haven't seen that isn't because of limitation of the dyno. There are actually dynos that you could load it down to almost nothing. But that's not the point. The point is that it doesn't matter if you could get it to do that. 600 RPM is an idle speed. If you have your automatic motor, whatever it is, with an automatic transmission, and you have this, even a stock cam or a mild cam in it, and you put the thing into drive, and it's sitting there at idle with your foot on the brake, it's going to be about 600 RPM. So that's going to be the idle speed. So that's never a wide open throttle speed. So you are never at wide open throttle at 600 RPM. I don't know how you could even get to wide open throttle at 600 RPM, unless maybe you had a 5 or 6 speed manual trans, and you're somehow idling down the street at 10 miles an hour. And I don't even know what the math would be on this. I'd have to calculate that. But you're idling down the street at 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, and then you just went to wide open throttle because the thing is idling essentially, and you went to wide open throttle in top gear, which would be foolish of you to even think about doing. There'd be no reason to do that. And the reason that I'm talking about this is not because of that situation. I get that a lot when I'm dyno testing. Why don't you load it down lower? We can, but again, even below 2,000 RPM, there's not a lot of effective data there because you are not at wide open throttle below 2,000 RPM. The number of people that are at wide open throttle below 2,000 RPM is next to nothing. The number of people that are at wide open throttle at 600 RPM is nothing. I mean, I guess you could find one person that is going to tell me, oh, I did it all the time. Okay, sure you do. But my point is, when they're listing this RPM range, I don't know exactly what their criteria is for when they're making this kind of catalog, this sort of marketing thing. I can tell you that any camshaft is not going to be super effective at 600 RPM, even a stock one. I mean, it's going to do okay, but again, you're not going to be at wide open throttle there, because if you have a stockish kind of cam where they're listing the start RPM as 600 to 4,800, the motor will rev beyond 4,800 and it will keep making power beyond 4,800. The peak power on a small cam like this, given whatever else is happening with the motor, might happen at 4,800 RPM, but it's not going to stop making power there. It's just going to roll over. Like, that's going to be the peak. And out at 5,000 or 5,500, maybe it's down 10 or 15 horsepower, 20 horsepower, whatever the rollover is on this thing, but it's still going to work. And so that top RPM range is not an absolute number. It's not, well, this runs into valve float at this point. It's not that. And the beginning number is also not a number, because nobody's at wide open throttle at 600 RPM. So you're not going to be getting, like, that's not the power range you should be looking at. You're going to be looking at, with almost any kind of like stock converter in anything, in a small block Chevy, small block Ford, whatever you have, you're going to be looking at almost the minimum RPM is going to be 2,000 RPM, where you would ever see wide open throttle, where you're interested in performance. Otherwise, you're interested in part throttle stuff, and that's a different thing. And we could talk about that. But the camshaft, and a smaller camshaft obviously is going to have a lower effective operating range than a bigger camshaft is. But the other thing that happens with some of these, and I've noticed this, I'm not picking on the comp guys, I'm just using that as an example of a catalog that I looked at, but I have seen when people list these RPM ranges that oftentimes it's like a lot broader RPM range than that camshaft probably has. I know one of the guys that pointed this out today. He said, yeah, this cam is telling me that it runs, that the effective operating range is 2,000 RPM to 6,500 RPM. I'm like, well, first of all, that's a really broad, like, that's a pretty big spread. That's a pretty effective camshaft. That sounds like a VVT cam to me. It doesn't sound like a singular fixed cam. And the other thing is the cam was 230 plus degrees of duration at 50. And I tried to explain to him, I said, look, you're not going to be making good power with this cam at 2,000 RPM. Oh, but it's listed here. I said, I don't care what it's listed at. I said, the marketing number that they're using to tell you what the effective RPM range is, I said, varies greatly. I said, if this were an LS, are you running it on a 4.8, a 5.3, a 6.0, 6.2, some sort of stroker version, a 408, a 427? I said, going from a 4.8 to a 7 liter, I said, you're going to change the effective RPM range dramatically. And so they can't list something in the catalog that says this is the RPM range. I said, and also on a 230 cam with any motor, with any realistic kind of combination that you would put together, 2,000 RPM, it's not going to be effective there. It's way too big of a cam to be effective at 2,000 RPM. So the question is, well, why then would the manufacturers list this RPM range like this? And that's what his question. He goes, well, why are they listing that? I guess, said, well, I can't speak for all manufacturers. I said, but there is incentive to do that, because the wider the range is, they're going to get guys like you that want this big cam that's going to make a lot of power, but also somehow, because you've listed this RPM range, that now they think that, oh, also I'm going to get, lots of low speed power because this thing says it's good. That this was his own interpretation of what this column actually means. his own interpretation was, well, then it's going to also be good at 2000, and then it's also going to store them on the big end. I'm like, that doesn't work like that. If only that were true, that would be great. But that size cam is not going to be good at that lower RPM range. So the difference between where the cam will run and where it will run most effectively is shifted by at least 1,000 RPM from where they're starting at. And also, if you put that cam at a 4.8, it's going to go beyond 6,500 RPM. It's going to be effective out at 7,000. If you put it with a short runner intake manifold, obviously it's going to be good at a higher RPM range and ported heads and all that. And particularly on the smaller motor, it's going to want to rev. So my point and the point that I was trying to make to him, and I think that I was successful. I said, look, you shouldn't even be looking at, you should look at that RPM range that they're listing in a catalog when you're comparing different cams. I said, use it as a guide. I said, but it's not absolute. And also there's incentive for them to make it, maybe grander than it actually is. And so you shouldn't look at that range as, he was looking at it like, oh, this is one of Richard's dyno tests. This shows that this thing works good from 2,600 or whatever. And he's thinking that that's what that is. I said, that's not data. That's not factual data that you're reading there. I said, that's just marketing, and that's a different thing. So when you're looking at that, just know that those numbers are not, by any stretch of the imagination, they're not absolute. So little safety tip for you. See what you guys got going on. So okay. Real short and sweet, man. Have you ever been at wide open throttle at 600 RPM? Should be a pretty easy one, I would think. I did catch, I wasn't able to film it, unfortunately, but I did catch another king snake the other day, yesterday. I was riding my bike and was riding out by our old ranch. And it's a long, long straightaway where guys used to race all the time because the straightaway is, I don't know, 1.5 miles or 2 miles long. But there was a couple of boards, laying along the side of the road. And I'm like, I'm definitely going to check that. So I stopped my bike, turned my watch off because, I'm timing myself, got to get the data. And then sure enough, there was a king snake under there. I'm like, I don't have my camera or anything. So what I did was after I did a 10 or 11 mile ride. And then when I got back, I got my truck and drove back out there and brought my camera. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to go catch this and film it. And I'm also going to take it over to show my little nephews. And they're going to think it's cool. And he was gone. Naturally, he was gone. And then so I went over to the 2 other places where I had found the other snakes because the baby king snake that I had was there a couple of times in a row. So I'm like, oh, he's definitely going to be there. And I went back to find him. He wasn't there. And I'm like, okay, I know that there's a baby garter snake under this one thing. He's been there for 6 days in a row. So he's definitely still going to be there because I wanted to bring a little snake over because my nephews, I wanted them to see one. They hadn't seen one in person, I don't think. And so I went over and the garter snake was also gone. So I'm like, yep, that's just somebody talking to me, telling me, yep, you don't get to be a hero uncle and go bring over snakes. Indianapolis is in the house. Spreading the word on Richard Oldham Performance. Thank you. Thank you, Indy. We like it. What determines what RPM your engine can handle? There are lots of things because there are lots of different RPMs that different parts of your motor can withstand. Usually the RPM range that you can rev it to, the first thing that we look at is valve train, but then you can also look at oiling and lots of other things that can help determine that. Can handle our best operating range. Yeah, those are different things. Teach me what is one. Richard of the Camshaft. Nice. Doesn't mean it's where it's the most efficient at moving air because an engine is essentially an air pump. It doesn't. This RPM operating range doesn't, like I said, as we went over, doesn't really mean any of that. Scottish, what's going on? I have a built LS3 4L80. Want to make 1,000 horsepower. I was told that I should get the RHP 1400. They're not listed on your website. Why is that? Do you want to run a single turbo or do you want to run twins? The twins will be up there. If you want to make 1,000 horsepower, I would get one of our G42s, or you could get a pair of our 3076s, which might be up by now. Order the valve spring tool. valve springs and tool. Turbo keychain, nice. A new shirt, I like it. Low Buck Mafia, so you're part of the team. Welcome. You're either about that lifestyle or you're not. Also orders what I hope is the correct flex plate for my 4L80 swap and HB tuners arrives tomorrow. Nice, dude. You got a bunch of stuff. Any guys in here with a built motor? I've done a few of those. Just in time for my automatic transmission course. That's cool. Followed by my power and performance class. Where I learn tuning and HB tuners specific. Oh, that'll be good. That's a good thing to learn, to have somebody there that knows it and can teach you. You can ask questions about. Are the 660 valve springs good enough to run a set of 823s to 6500 without valve float, or do I need to run the hollow stem valves? We can run a stock springs with a stock cam on an LS that has those springs on it, that has those 550 of those springs, and it will easily rev to 6500. Do you want it to make power up there? But you don't need a 660 valve spring. You need to also put the springs in that match your camshaft. 660 springs on a 550 lift cam is not a good idea. It's possible somebody in the chat has a built motor. The guy leading the chat, I think, does. I just moved my 2-valve Mustang after it was sitting for a year. It had random broken plastic under it. Uh-oh. Think suspension parts dried up. Is it maybe a belly pan or something? Ford has plastic suspension parts? I've never heard of that. I put some of the pieces together. It came out as a big circle. I don't know where from underneath. I got a 2006 5.7 block, 2015 heads. I got a question about the price for the machine work. Disregard what I said earlier. I didn't read everything. I don't know where they get those ranges, but now I'm curious. Yeah, it's not. I don't know that, like, what I would like it to be is I would like it to be like an effective RPM range, like where the thing makes, where it starts making good torque. And then, because they could even get it, you could fudge that a little bit. Like, where do you think that, where is this thing actually starting to do, good on torque? And then all the way out past the horsepower peak. Because most people rev past the horsepower peak. So it's not just to the horsepower peak, it's past that. So if your motor makes peak power at 6,500, but at 7,000, it's only down 10 or 15, that's still an effective part of the operating range. And most people use that. So that would be okay. But I don't think that they do that. I don't think that a lot of guys have run enough tests on things to actually know what that is. Because then they'd have to, like, if we just do a 4.8, we could do a small block Chevy. If we did a small block Chevy, you'd have to run it on a 265, a 307, a 302, a 350, a 327, a 400, to get all of those. And then how do you list all that? It's just, it's hard. They're doing what they're doing and it's working. Just paid $1,300 to have a standard mill and deck done, 20 over 4 done on LQ4 that included new pistons and rings. Richard, your cam horsepower curves are typically very flat and above 6,000. So would you shift at 7,000 when the horsepower starts to fall off a little earlier before the torque falls off? I'd have to look at the curve. Where you want to shift is, like, if you look at the horsepower curve, the RPM range, given your gearing, whatever the gear split is, whatever gives you the most average horsepower is typically where you want to shift. So as you go past the horsepower curve, because it's going to be past the horsepower curve, and then that drops you back down to a point where this little tip of the mountain, that's the best tip that you can do. Cam running is 3,000 to 6,500. The Spring Raider 660 springs, is that going to be your biggest factor in your valve train? 6,500 should be no problem. Yeah, 660 springs are usually have a lot of rate. Usually you're up near 400 or more. I'm paying 2,000 for 10 overbore, deck, bearings, etc. No pistons. Yeah, I would say the thing that you do is call a few different machine shops and then price it out. You got to do comparison shopping. Scrolling back, scrolling. Live chats are helpful. 150 pounds closed, 400 open. Okay. 2K sounds like a little stiff for just machine work. I was thinking that 2 maybe for a short block, but I'm cooked now. He's got my pistons and eagle rods. My motor idles higher than 600 RPM. Most of them do. I'm just talking about for a stock one that did that. King snakes are here in Arizona. Yeah, the snakes are definitely out. I mean, at least in this area where it's and in Florida and other places where it's warm, you know, March, April, May, even a little bit into June, good snake months. I answered yes, but I was showing the missus how to drive stick and making a point. There you go. Local guy who mountain bikes up trails anymore. He got tagged, rode off the trail instead of calling 911. Didn't make it. Somebody died from a rattlesnake bite. That's really, really rare, especially for a grown person. You shouldn't have an issue with running the engine 6500, 7200 as long as the rest of it will handle it. How does the Cosworth rev so high? How does the double over cam dedicated race motor rev so high? I've seen the snakes you posted up. That's crazy. They're all around you. They're not all around me. I mean, I have to actively go seek them and hike through, which I don't recommend that you do this, through, you know, waist high tall grass and shorts over to rocks where there should definitely be rattlesnakes, but there were also king snakes. And then wading through high grass like that in an area where we find more rattlesnakes than anything else. Normally, I don't recommend that. That's not maybe a good idea, but then I have to go over and lift up boards and rocks and things and try to find the snakes. I'm generally curious what machine the folks who were here at Wide Open Throttle at 600 RPM were operating. Yeah, maybe a lawnmower or a go-kart. Yeah, but I hear that you need to run hollow stem valves because the factory 823 heads are solid valves. Dan, go take a look at all of the tests that I ran on the LY6 motor. So go to this channel and go look up 6-liter cam tests or 6-liter how maximum perform at 6-liter. I think is my best video. All of those tests were run on LY6s that don't have hollow stem valves, and all of them are way past 6,500 RPM. So whoever told you that you need hollow stem valves to go to that RPM range, maybe they meant 7,500 or 8,000, because 6,500 is easy with factory stuff. What cam specs are important to run turbo efficiency between a compressor and turbine, 1 or less? I'm not sure I understand what your question is. There are no specs that you need to match to a turbo. You need to pick your camshaft for what you want the motor to do naturally aspirated, and then you need to add the turbo. Richard, you should do build advising as a live stream, too similar to how your podcasts were with the channel that you did the interview. I should do a live build? Is that what you're saying? LY6, 65 over, TSP cam, ARP, head bolts, aluminum forged piston, stock rods, Gen 4, stock crank, looking for 750, 800, making 500 now, was thinking 76 millimeter, looking for the least amount of lag. Mac, go get one of our G42 V-band turbos. It would be better than a T4 76 millimeter. What are my thoughts on short travel lifters? What specifically is your question about that? They do work. They make picking push rod length a lot more difficult and time consuming because they have very little margin of error. So oftentimes it requires custom push rods, but they work. And when we ran high RPM stuff, we use them, but I don't ever run them on most normal stuff. My dyno tells me when to shift. I'm gonna need a fuel injectors and fuel pump, prepping for boost. Well, how much power are you trying to make, Scotch? I can't remember, but we have 535 pumps and we have 1,000 cc injectors. Those should be good. I'm the guy that goes wide open throttle at 600 RPM. Stock heads, LS2 C6, 3600 Circle D, went 1196 at 117 yesterday. So you went 600, you go wide open throttle at 600 RPM with a 3600 stall converter? That would be a neat trick. When you say wide open throttle at 600 RPM, my dad worked with old school engines made by Worthington and power plants. Each engine weighed 90 tons. It was an inline 6-cylinder, wide open throttle at 600. Yeah, you can. Stationary engines will do that. But they're usually, like you said, really, really big. Not the things that we drive around in. A lot of Jimmy, my buddy here, he worked on industrial engines for, I think, for irrigation stuff. And theirs were 1800 at wide open throttle. They were big. I think that they were big Fords. Weather's been crazy here. Woke up to 65-degree tornadic storm rolls through. Now it's snowing. Nice. Richard, you should do a live stream on boosted fuel systems and boost setups, fuel pumps versus inlines. I've already done a live feed on that. I've already done fuel systems. And we've talked about fuel lines as well. So you're saying we're using snake types as cam names for a cam series? No snake names. Fun fact, there's only a single antivenom for all venomous snake bites. That seems odd to me, that they would use the same for a rattlesnake as they would for a cobra or a crate. Currently build an L92 6.2 engine. What's the best off the shelf that it requires no more than a 2800 stall? I would actually need more information than that. There's no best off the shelf cam. Even with a 2800, what cam are like? How do you want the drivability to be? Do you want this thing like what intake are you using and all that? Because there's still a big difference in camshafts that you could put in that combination. Some for 220, 225, 227 kind of cam for a little bit better drivability. You can go all in with the 230 plus cams and just have it be all power, but less drivability. There's still some choices there. If your goal is a weekend car for high RPM speed runs, would you choose an LSXR intake with short runners or a Holley higher M intake? An LSXR intake, are you talking about an adjustable one with short runners? Because I wouldn't pick either one of those. I would pick, if it's a cathedral port, I'd pick a fast, but with the long runners. "2010 Mustang fuel pump is not enough to feed a 6-liter. I knew it, but I still tried. AM 400 fixed that right up. There you go. 495 Olds built what kind of cam to make 600 plus? It's a 455 stroker? I don't really have any experience at all with an Oldsmobile. But I can tell you from other big blocks that would be 500 inches, 600 horsepower, we would do that with certainly with a 255, 260 kind of camshaft at 50. And it could be, I don't know what heads you have on it. Hopefully if you have, the better the heads you have, the smaller the camshaft you could do to get 600 horsepower. Is 10.7 to 1 compression too much on LQ4 or the G42 LS3 heads? 110 octane. Should I go lower compression? Not with 110 octane. You're fine. As long as it's intercooled. You can go with lower compression and just turn the boost up and make as much or more power. But 110 is still pretty high. I love driving my 535 big block Ford at 1,000 RPM around the neighborhood. Does your 543 big block Ford have a small enough cam in it that it's okay at 1,000 RPM? And does it have a dual plane intake manifold on it and not a single plane? I had one 5.7 with a Trek Norris. I have an 1800 right now. The 2800 was more susceptible to an engine stall out due to the tune. At 1800, it's not as bad. Just enough funds to get HPT to fix the tune right now. Pump gas, unfortunately, methanol injection possible. What horsepower will be 1,000? Well, if you're running pump gas, the thousands will support a lot of power, way more than you're ever going to make on pump gas. By the build advising you should do a live stream and let subs call in and discuss their builds. You want me to do a live stream where other people call in and talk about their builds? Couldn't you do that here? Shift when the RPM is so high that the motor starts sounding quiet. Just when one of the rods goes out, then shift, right? That's for idles. How much do they charge for HPT now? Somebody wants to know. Adam wants to know. The factory LS2 manifolds flow enough to make 750 on an air to water on the stock rotating semi LS2 with an air to water intercore. If you're talking about will a factory LS2 manifold make 700 horsepower with a turbo, yeah, very easily. I have an L77 6-liter I'm building. Wanting to throw your comp cam, you always recommend it with short travel lifters and upgraded springs, debating on an LSXR intake. Goal is to hold 6,500 to 7,000 per minute. Okay. I don't think you need short travel lifters for that, but you can run that if you want. You'll definitely need springs, and you'll need the right cam for running sustained RPM. Are you doing like roll racing or something? Donkey cam. Some specs for both beehive and dual valve springs. Which one and why? You won't get the same specs for both of those. I don't know how that's possible, because it would be hard to get the same rate with the same exact rate and the same opening and close, or the same open and close pressures. So that would be hard. They're definitely going to be different, but more than likely more often than not, people use a beehive spring that has less open and seat pressure than the dual springs. The dual springs tend to be put on things that are higher RPM. Ring gap as well. Ring gap's always good on boost. I have a ported LS3 rec port heads leaning toward the fast LSXR intake. Long runners it is, then I wouldn't do that. If it's an LS3, I wouldn't put a fast on it, because it gains you nothing over just a factory LS3 intake manifold. And if you want to make power at higher engine speeds, that's where a high ram or something will come into play. But you will lose power through much of the curve with those shorter runner manifolds. I like my LS1 around all the time, trying to hypermile. I was thinking a 31 by 12 by 4 for the inner core. Do you offer a billet ball bearing? I don't know if we have a ball bearing version of that. I think that there is one. There's also a G42 1400 or 1450. I don't know if Jimmy has any of those in stock right now. Based on, I'm gonna have to do the rings for my Hemi, going around 20 pounds of boost, and his forge. What ring gaps would you advise or refer to in gapping? I don't have the DSS box and it's twin turbo. The piston manufacturer is not going to, I mean, they're going to give you piston to wall clearance, hopefully, on what's required for that piston based on its metallurgy. But the ring gap is going to be the same. You want to go like 6,000ths per inch of bore. I wouldn't let Google pick your static compression. You should go to Wallace Racing and do it. Spent the last 2 days on the computer for all day trying to make a material list for painting my hot rod. Going to be 1,900 just in primer, base, and clears. Yeah, paint's not cheap anymore. Okay, let's see. I'm having a piecemeal funds for a steering rack. It'll be 4 months. Paramedic here. They do a broad spectrum antivenom for region-specific species. Crowfab is primarily used here in North America. Covers most all of our possible venomations. But not the same for a crate or a king cobra or a sea snake or an inland taipan, which would be bad if you got bit, or a black mamba, or a king brown. I know we're bouncing around to different continents there. Richard, the fuel system is the missing link to install the cam and boost. Do you happen to have any garage sale parts available for fuel? I don't have any garage sale fuel system parts. Has anyone tried the TSP RV cam? It makes a pretty good torque curve. I haven't seen that. Contact Bill Travato for the 495 Olds cam advice. With proper, I don't know what kind of cams are even available for an Oldsmobile. I don't know how much selection you have for those. I've never even looked up a cam for an Olds. With proper timing and properly picked associated parts, what's the practical max static compression for 87 and 89 pump gas? There is none. You could run 12-to-1, but if you have a really big camshaft in it, you might get away with it. Also, if you run the thing really, really cool, you might get away with it. And you have really, really cold air, you might get away with it. So that's a loaded question. There's not an octane and pump gas direct relationship. We got 2 feet of snow today. That's not good. When will the RSP Twin 1600s be back in stock? I don't know. I have to ask Jimmy. I didn't realize all of those had sold out. I'm not roll racing, but top speed runs on private runway. Want to get 200 NA on my L77 with re-gearing. Okay. Yeah, that's a long pull. We've done some of that stuff in the past. A lot of that stuff in the past. Running a blow-through carb setup. Will 110 work as good as E85 on a blow-through carb setup, non-intercooled? No, it won't. I mean, it will work in terms of the octane rating, but it's not going to have the same charge cooling as E85. I want to run gas. Okay. You should run an intercooler. Even on a blow-through, you should run an intercooler, especially if you're running high boost. MP4s. Vegas, did you get your thoughts on the... Did I get my thoughts on an LV3 engine? What are my thoughts? I didn't know that I was looking for them. Where was that place you said go to? Wallace. Wallace Racing. WALLACE. Go to Wallace Racing compression calculator or Wallace Racing displacement calculator. They have all of those. Do you recommend a go-to cam for sustained high RPM? Think 7,000 held for a minute possible. Well, you're not going to be at 1 RPM if you're doing a top speed thing. You're going to be accelerating, albeit slowly at the top. But it still should be climbing, because I think once you get to your top speed over whatever distance this is, you're going to be letting out of it, right? I mean, this isn't like the Silver State. The website is richardholdnerperformance.com. I think I understand. Bigger make more power more easily, but when it comes to making max power, some smaller engines have thicker sidewalls, allowing for more power. For Adam, what are you talking about? It depends on the engine. There's no universal compression versus octane. So for the average Joe, they want 700s. Just go big cubic inches. 700 is a lot easier to make NA with a bigger motor. But for boost, it doesn't matter. I mean, it matters a little bit. It's hard to do with like my sprint motor. With a 1 liter sprint motor, that's hard to do. But 700 is easy to do with any sort of like 2 liter and up Honda based motor. And then obviously easy to do with a turbo on a 4.8, 5.3, 6.0, any kind of LS. Each region has its own cocktail for bites, and all of the zoos typically have specific antivenoms. Yep. But what you're saying is that it's the same. You think it's the same base for a coral snake, a western diamondback, an eastern diamondback, a water moccasin, a copperhead, all of those kinds of things that we would normally see here. Although not very many people get bit by coral snakes, though. Jimmy's the guy that's helping me with Richard Holden Performance. He's the guy that does all of your orders and stuff. What's the drivability of a 255 cam in a big block? In a 500-inch motor, it's better than it would be in it's not the cam I would pick for drivability, but it's better in a 500-inch motor than it is in a 300-inch motor. TSP RV cam 208, 216, 495, 110. Yeah, that sounds an awful lot like, other than the 110, it sounds like a tight LSA version of like of some of the factory cams. What compression am I looking for a 489 big block if I want to go twin turbo, not for speed, torque, GMC? You could make it as low as 8-to-1. I think I would rather do it at like an aluminum headed one at like 9-to-1. Because the turbos are going to do all the heavy lifting. Is there a max lift you wouldn't exceed when it comes to 6,000 to 7,000 RPM versus 8 to 9? Asking how sensitive lift has become in comparison. That again, I think you're looking at it the wrong way. You're not trying to run maximum lift anyway. You're not trying to run an 800 or 900 lift camshaft. Certainly not in an LS. You're not even going to run a 700 lift camshaft in an LS. You're going to run a 600 lift camshaft in an LS. And so the range where you would be running it in an LS is not going to affect the RPM. But it would be harder with a given duration and more lift. It would tend to make the camshaft less stable. Completely stock 5.3 on 10 pounds. Lost oil pressure today and locked up. Could it be boost related, or the pump gave up? Yeah, you need to look in there and see if you detonated it, if you lost fuel flow because of a clogged filter or an injector, that kind of thing. I'm having trouble making boosts over spring pressure with the true boost controller. I'm not 60 millimeter VS Racing wastegate and a 75-78. Okay, a 78-75. Turbo 6 liter with a cam. I can only get 2 pounds of boost above the spring pressure with the combo. Do you have is this a manual controller? Do you have it hooked up backwards? Is it wrong? Invest in a set of V-band shorties or just stay with stock truck manifolds. My GTO has long tube headers, and I don't have a set of truck LS manifolds lying around. Majoring on boost any videos to learn the basics. You will have a kit before too long. I don't know when it's going to be available, when the whole kit's going to be available, but there are lots of turbo things out there that you can buy. The stock manifolds will be fine. If this is NA, I would definitely run long tube headers because it will definitely make more power. If this is a turbo thing, then a lot of times guys don't want to use the truck manifolds because they run into issues when they reverse them. They run into issues with the front accessory stuff. But there are lots of inexpensive turbo manifolds out there. 2012 Tahoe, 416, LS3, Holly high ram, air to water, 4L80, truck plus cam, 373s. We'll make 1,000 wheel horsepower. It's a drag and drive build, a fun car. Should I do a single G42 or smaller twins? If you only want to make 1,000 horsepower, the G42 will do 1,000 at the tire. So if that's what you want, it will do that. If you're wanting to do more than that, then I would put the twins on it. Or if you just like the way that the twins look. Turning it only from all-wheel drive to two-wheel drive. Truck plus. Twin ball bearing 770s with boost level. Restrict these turbos to on your 1,000 cc. Yeah, I thought that you were not going to be making a lot of power. You should run them on 7-pound springs and then see what happens. Need a cam recommended for an aluminum 6-liter with TFS 215 heads. Wiseco junkyard dog pistons should be around 12.7 on E85 at a pre-runner. So I don't know what the needs are of a pre-runner. Like, do you need a really broad power band? Are you only at the top of the RPM range? You're trying to make maximum horsepower. What intake manifold is this thing? What RPM range are you running? Yosemite, all right, is in the house. What in the cam profile determines operating range? Is purely based on duration. It's not intake duration. It's also exhaust duration, and a little bit to LSA, but it's really valve events. All of those things that we're talking about that we're identifying as an individual thing. It's not an individual thing. They produce the valve events, which determine when the cam is going to be effective. RPM limit on the RHP truck plus camo springs. I don't know what you mean by RPM limit. Like where is it going to make power at? Or how high could you free spin it? I don't really know what you mean. Do you have maps for the turbos in the store? No, but we have maps for comparable turbos that are available. The Crow Fab covers copperhead, cottonmouth, rattlesnakes. The coral snake has its own, but quit making it for the most part in 2023. There wasn't enough demand. Yeah, it's a rear fang snake. The bites are really, really rare because you run across those so rarely, and it doesn't interact with people that much. But rattlesnakes, I see more rattlesnakes when I go out looking for snakes than any other snake. So we have northern Pacifics here where I am. And down in the very southern part of the state, there's probably western diamondbacks there too. But those are the ones that I see more than anything. They're not fun to play with. I mean, I catch a few of them, but I see maybe 100 of them a season. Thanks for the advice. Everyone online saying to replace the factory LS3 intake for the Holly or fast intake. Yeah, don't do it for the fast. If this was a cathedral port, yes, the fast is a good upgrade compared to any of the stock intake manifolds. The fast intake on the LS3 version, the rec port version, is not a good upgrade. Who do you have for CNC head porting? There's lots of good guys. If you have a factory head, the Texas Speed does them. Total Engine Airflow has always done great stuff. West Coast Cylinder Head. I mean, there's a ton of people that do it. Make effort, all RPM range, fast LSXRT. The LSXRT is good for cathedral port stuff, the cathedral port version, but not for rec port. I don't even know if they make a rec port LSXRT, but if they do, that's not one you want to get. Add motor mounts can affect other stuff. Yes, they can. Hey guys, I have a question. I'm new to the LS world. Are 823 heads any good? Yes, very good. Engine came out of a 2015 Chevy Express van with a 6-liter. Yes, those are the best, arguably the best factory heads that you can get. They certainly flow the most and they will make the most power. They lose a little bit of power down low compared to some of the cathedral port stuff, but they flow over 300 CFM, so they're ready to make lots and lots of power. What are the spring cams safe to RPM wise, or does it become rocker limits, valve train springs, 6,500 before valve float? No, you're thinking about this wrong. It's not. You should stop getting this max RPM thing. You should ask yourself where the thing makes peak power at, and then can I rev past the power peak? And in the case of a Truck Plus cam, yes, you can rev past the power peak. And yes, you can rev past 6,500 RPM without any problem at all. You put the right springs in it, you put that camshaft in it, and it will rev out there. The question now is, like on a 6-liter, it's not going to make power, peak power at 6,500 RPM. Not with a LQ4 and LQ9 with the truck manifold on it and that camshaft. It's going to make peak power. So revving it out to 6,500 or 7,000 RPM is just not going to, it's not going to do you any good. So I'll tell you on our thing where in the testing that I just did recently to give you an idea. 6-liter Davis. So Truck Plus. A Truck Plus with a Trailblazer SS made peak power at 6,100 RPM. Still was making at 60. How high did we rev this? We revved it to 6,500. So at 6,100, it was making 464. And at 6,500, it was making 454. And we could have revved it beyond that. It would still rev out higher than that. It's just that it's not making power out there. We're past the power peak. So that's what we want to do when we test. We test past the power peak. Can a turbo kit on my own versus paying $10,000 for a turbo kit? Any views to learn basic needs? Yeah, I have videos up on DIY turbo stuff. It's not really that hard. And it's if you're talking about spending $10,000 on a turbo kit, that's a lot of money. I would definitely do it myself rather than spend that. Factory rec port intake 90 versus 1 or 2. Is it worth trying to get the bigger throttle body? No, because the opening in the manifold is only 90 millimeters. So 102 millimeter throttle body on a 90 millimeter opening does nothing. I'm running the Truck Plus cam. What heads would be good to offer the low end torque to compensate for the high RPM cam? A Truck Plus is not a high RPM cam on a 6-liter. It's a good cam for a 6-liter. Other than lift, what else is affected by camshaft when going from 1.6 to 1.7? You're affecting duration of tiny amount, a couple of degrees. Just got back from the website. It's crazy. The compression is 9.46. Google said 9.45. That's pretty close. Not sure if I already asked, but will the new BTR Canada valves make it to RHP testing this year? I don't know. I don't know when that would happen. Just watch a bunch of your videos on LS versus big block torque. Have a 2011 2500 with an L96. I tow with it. Need more pulling power. Thinking about making a 408 or an 8.1 swap. The bigger motors will definitely have more torque down at 2,000 RPM or whatever, if that's where you want it, 2,000 or 2,500 RPM. What I find in doing real towing with these motors is that if you're going up a grade where you need more power, it downshifts and now you're at 3,000 or 3,500. And so you're not at 2,000 anymore. It'd be nice just to go over all the grades that we want to go over at 2,000 RPM in high gear, towing whatever we're towing. But I don't know that that's realistic, and I don't know that it's necessary. But a 408 would be better than a standard displacement one. I don't know that you need to go to the 8.1. Where does 102 millimeter throttle body make sense more than a 90? It's not the thing that I look at. The throttle body opening size is the last thing that I look at. So I look at the intake manifold as what effective RPM range do I want and what manifold design gets me that. So if you want to run, the best, like if you have a cathedral port thing, put a fast on it. That's going to make the best average power and peak power that you can put on a cathedral port thing. If you want only more peak power and you're willing to trade all the stuff like up to 6,000 or in some cases more than up to more than 6,000 RPM, and you're just wanting the peak stuff, then put a short runner manifold on it. It will be better. It will make power up there. It'll make more peak power. It's going to make way less average power. So that's why for that deal, and that's also why I've done endless intake manifold shootouts where I tested 20 or 25 different intake manifolds. The cathedral port one's up. The LS3 one is up, and then the LS3 carbureted one is up. So you have all of those out there, and just pick the power curve that you want. And then I look at throttle body size. Once you get up to a certain power level, you want to look at a bigger throttle body and a bigger, and most of these aftermarket intake manifolds. I mean a fast, a high ram. High ram's available with a bunch of different lids, but for the most part, guys pick the 102 or 105. The fast is going to be 102 or 105. Most of the aftermarket manifolds pick the bigger throttle opening, but with milder combinations, you don't need that much throttle body. Every time I nail the Mustang, I idle at 500 because the stock cam idles like it's bigger there. Okay. If there's vacuum in the manifold, the wide open throttle with the 90, then that's time for 102. 3,000 RPM is where it likes to sit in fourth gear up a hill until it gets real steep, and then downshifts into third and wide open throttle. If you have to choose one company for a cam and valve spring components, who would you choose? One and done. Go for everything off their catalog. Who's your favorite? That's not a thing. I don't have that. There's lots of good camshafts out there from a variety of different manufacturers. There's lots of good springs out there from a lot of different manufacturers. I would be more interested, and that's why I do all this testing. I'd be more interested in picking the right specs for the cam to do the thing that you want it to do, which is obviously wholly subjective. Be more interested in that. There's not one thing, there's not one go-to thing for anything. Is it worth going to from a 1.6 to 1.7 rocker, assuming piston to valve clearance is there with a hydraulic roller cam? For what is this application? Is it a small block Ford application? And sometimes rockers do something and sometimes they don't. Are you replacing a factory non-roller rocker 1.6 with a 1.7 roller rocker? Is there such thing as overspringing? Yes, 100% there is. Like using 660 springs set up on a 575 lift cam. Also, what springs you recommend for a 237, 247 cam and a 575 lift? You should need a cam. You need like 600 lift springs for that. And I wouldn't put 660s on it. It's way more than you need, because the spring becomes less effective the farther away it is from coil bind. You don't want it at coil bind. You want it down near coil bind. And when it's really far away from coil bind, I'm sure all of you guys have seen the videos, the Spintron videos from, I think that they're Spintron videos from Ben at EFI University, where they're showing the frequency movements of the spring. So it doesn't just go up and down. It wiggles around. It oscillates, spring oscillation. So that's why we say that you need to match the spring to the cam, because it's more than just lift and it's more than just RPM. All this kind of hula dancing rigmarole is going on, and that's hard on springs, and that affects performance. Longer runners provide higher intake runner velocity till what point is too long? Well, what is the motor? What is the camshaft? What is this RPM range that you're talking about? What is long? What is short? You got to tell them. There's not a universal long and a universal short. That's why I do so many tests. So you can see this manifold versus this manifold. This one has shorter runners than this one. And here's what they did. And here's normally some sort of crossover point. Like the long runner one does better up into a certain RPM range. And then the shorter one does better. But if there's an even shorter one, then the crossover will be different. If there's one that's slightly longer than this, but still not as long as this, they'll cross over at a different point. That's why I do lots of different weird, super richy kind of adjustable intake manifolds where I change intake runner length, usually in 2-inch increments, to show you what happens when you do that. Speaking of the 306, ever heard of anyone putting roller lifters in one? I don't. What lifter do they use in that 300? Is it just a standard Ford width? Is it like a small block Ford one? So if you put a hydraulic roller in there and had a cam made, does the oiling bar, the groove come up above the you know, out of the range of oiling, you'd need to look at that. I've been at wide open throttle 300 RPM. I've been at wide open throttle 0 RPM to use the clear flood thing. Yeah, that doesn't really count, does it? I'm just joining to a set bearings a little loose for a jet boat. Are you at wide open throttle for extended periods of time? Then yes. Do you agree with BTR on the stage 4 V3 truck cam that 625 springs are needed when it's 219, 230X at 553? No. I don't know why you would need a 625 set of springs on a 550 cam. I don't know if they don't have a 550 spring that will run maybe the RPM range that they want for that. Have you used clear flood before? Yeah, I think probably all of us have. If you're curious, I'm looking at 1:7:3 ratios. That's a typical kind of Ford one. Is there a safety ratio you want on your springs, like 20% before coil bind? No, it's not a fixed amount. It's usually a measurement amount, like 30 or 40 thousandths before coil bind. It should be 467. We've got 1 more minute. Have you ever been at wide open throttle at 600 RPM? 26% are saying yes. Yeah, I'd like to see the data on that. I wonder if I should have said 0 RPM and then there still would have been the same amount. Throttle body spaces are probably the greatest modification on LS, like on any motor, right? They all work universally fantastic. What influences spring longevity? Yes, lift, ramp rate, cycle time. This currently has 1.6 rocker. I was thinking of going to 1.7, 351. Okay. Trick flow cam. What cam is that? Is it their stage 1 or stage 2? My LQ4 idles at 5,500 or 550. Okay, that's good. Regarding the pole, I've driven diesels. But are you on a diesel? Are you at wide open throttle at 600 RPM? I've driven diesels. What RPM does a 5 horsepower go-kart do? Way more than that. Stage 2, yeah, isn't the stage 2 already going to be in the mid 500s? Are you going to sell log style turbo exhaust manifolds on the store? Yeah, we have our own design that we did that's different than what else is out there. You can see we have the prototypes of it up in the videos. Come to LS Fest at Bowling Green. I'll show you how it's done. With a 3600 stall, I can go wide open throttle at any RPM I want. Okay. So you think that there's merit to 600 horsepower wide open throttle dyno test? Because there's not. It wouldn't make any difference what you show me at the track. That's not going to change my mind. You have a recommendation for a 302 HO roller cam for what application? I just remembered. Yes, wide open throttle at 600 RPM, hauling 4 on water skis. I don't know how that's possible. Are you guys strictly Ford or Chevy? Have you seen my channel? Have you gone and looked at all of the different playlists for things? In my garage there is a Chevy, but it's a 1 liter 3-cylinder Chevy Sprint turbo. And then in the driveway is a Dodge 2.2 GLHS turbo. And then my wife's Mercedes. And I test every kind of motor that I can get my hands on. And I also have I'm an original owner 5-liter Mustang. And I set records in this Honda. And I love Hondas. My son has a Honda. I don't think I own any Hondas right now. Do you have videos on the L92, L95 power maxing NA trucks? Yes, there are lots of L92 videos up. It doesn't matter what the number is, the designation of the LS engine. It doesn't matter what your specific number is. If I test a 6-liter, that applies to all 6 liters. If I test a 6.2, it applies to all 6.2s. I know it's not the specific thing that you want that you want to see tested, but it's going to do the same thing. If you put a 231 camshaft in an L92 or an LS3, you're going to go from here to here. That's what they do. Could we load an engine down to 600 RPM? I think that there are definitely dynos that will do it. I don't know why you would. When do you test the GT35 on a 6-liter? That's not the turbo we're going to be selling for a 6-liter. And you did land speed. Yeah, I've set a lot of land speed records. Don't mention the secret turbo cam. Yeah, that's all of our cams, right? We get an RH branded driver's side turbo manifold. A driver's side? That would be weird. No, nobody puts the turbo on an LS on the driver's side unless you did a twin. Oh, and I have an RB25. That's right. I do have that. Oh, I have lots of motors. I probably have 20 of those. All kinds of different ones. Dodge 2, yep. It's a GLH swapped. GLH. I have 2 Fords and a Chevy, but I want a K24. I do have a K24 also. I forgot about that. I have the motor. I just don't have a car. Do you have any opinions on the VW Audi 5-cylinder 2.5? I've never run one, so I don't have any experience with it. I've owned my Honda Z50 since I was 11. Oh, that's right. I do have a Honda in the garage. I have a Honda Trail 90. And I have a Honda lawnmower. I didn't get to vote, but 600 RPM sounds like idle speed. Yeah. VR5 is good. 6-liter LS making 400 horsepower. 5,500 stall converter. 1260 for 11 gears with a 26-inch tall tire. Why do you have such a high stall speed for a 400 horsepower 6-liter? Oh, it makes a burnout monster. Okay, that makes sense. that's a perfect answer. It's a perfectly legitimate answer. Put lots of gear and lots of stall speed, and then it basically it acts like a jet boat. Do you have an L28? I do. I have a Nissan. I have an L28 in the garage actually. That one's there too. What else? I have a bunch of the Sprint motors, and I think I got 3 of them in there. I have another. I have another Dodge motor there. I've got a bunch of Pontiac stuff that I'm trying to sell. There are 2 Barras in my storage. Those are not mine, but Zeta platform guys have them on the driver's side. Chevy SS, G8, Caprice, GTO guys. Why would theirs be different? A Honda Trail 70 with a Lifan 125. It will do 50. Yeah, that's way faster than I want to go. I don't want my Trail 90 to go that fast. I don't need it to go that fast. Although I have done top speed tests with it though. My S197 has more room on the driver's side for the turbo. Did you change your mind about K-swapping the GLS HS? No, every day that there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about that. That I don't long for a K24 and a 6-speed. I have a 1930 Ford Phaeton. Just got a 94 5-liter and T5. Is it going to be more of a cruiser kind of thing? I'll have to look and see where are you guys putting them on Foxes? Because we're putting an LS in my Fox, and I have an 88 5-liter. I didn't hear what you said about the Cosworth. Because it's a dedicated double overhead cam 4-valve race motor. I have a Honda lawnmower and a 1971 SL125. There you go. The Trailblazer, or the Trail 90, I think was 41 or something like that, or 42. It wasn't very fast. Why not SRT4 swap the GLHS? No, I don't think that the SRT4 is nearly the motor that a K series is. And I also want the 6-speed trans. I've been talking to people because I reached out to somebody that is on Facebook, and he has some sort of like wrecking yard thing with a bunch of RX-7. So I reached out to him and asked him if he had a rotary that I could buy, because I'm looking for a 12A or a 13B, just a running one, so that I could run stuff on the dyno. And he didn't have anything, and he reached out to Rob to see, because Rob's close by WASTEGATES, and Rob said he didn't have one either. That's too bad, because I want to run one on the dyno. I just want to like put a header on it and put a carburetor on it and put a turbo on it. Oh, the Zeta platform was developed by Holden. Okay, for right-hand drive. Okay, that makes sense. You know, my S197, the upper radiator hose and overflow tank is the biggest hindrance. Yeah, on a Fox, that shouldn't be much of a problem. WestTech probably has a bunch of junk that would be gold to the rest of us. Yeah, a lot of that stuff left, though. On that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up, and I will be back tomorrow.